Welcome to the Mount Pleasant Podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
This is the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cleary, and all thanks to the great people of Mount Pleasant Magazine, I get the honor, the privilege of introducing you to Mount Pleasant, the people who make it such a special place to do business, to work, and even to live. We're introducing you to Mount Pleasant's best on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. The first public library in Charleston opened back on January 1st of 1931. Since then, the library has expanded. The library system now with 18 branches, and 3 of them are located here in Mount Pleasant. So today on the Mount Pleasant Podcast, where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive, thought we'd explore the library because there's so much great things happening with the Charleston library system here in the East Cooper area. Angela Craig is the executive director of the Charleston County Public Library. First of all, let's just get into the Mount Pleasant area. 18 locations, 3 in Mount Pleasant. What are those 3 locations?
You. Yes. We have 3 beautiful libraries here in Mount Pleasant. We have the Village Library, which is actually a small house that is owned by the town of Mount Pleasant, but we lease. We've leased for, I think, 50 years, and we recently renovated and refreshed, and it's located in the Village. We have the Mount Pleasant Regional Library. It is off of Anna Knapp. And then we also have the Wando Library, which is down on 17, close to the Wando High School. So we have 3 beautiful libraries, each a different scale. The Village is actually one of our smaller ones. Mount Pleasant Regional is a good kind of middle size, but then the Wando Library is actually our second largest building within our system. It's 40,000 square feet, and it was the first of our new branches that we opened in 2019.
Well, let's go in reverse order then. We'll start with the Village, because the Village, from what I understand, was recently upgraded, remodeled, a small building, but a really nice facility.
Yeah, it's a small but beautiful space. I like to call it a boutique library. It's got a little something, it's very curated. And so we are very thoughtful about what we have on the shelves, of course, because we don't have a lot of shelf space. But there's a wonderful community of readers in Mount Pleasant, and the Village serves not just that community that's there, but then, people that are dropping in on their lunch hour and things like that. And so we have a great collection of new books for children, teens, and adults. We also have computers, of course. The renovation there actually freed up a lot of free space on the floor, so people can come in with their laptops, which they do often, and they can do a little bit of work, kind of like an office at home away from home. There's a thriving children's presence there. We aren't able to do very many programs in the building because it is quite small, but when the weather permits, we do a lot of wonderful programs outside. We have a beautiful outside space that's kind of like an amphitheater that children's groups will come, preschool, families, and things. We've had like 50 kids and families out there. So for a small library, it definitely is very active and very beloved by the community.
And that just goes to a bigger point about the libraries, because if you just think going to the library means you take out a book, bring it home and read it. We're talking about a little amphitheater. There's programs. So at the Village, you've got programs going on all the time that go beyond just reading a book.
That's right. And it is scaled for children's, teens, and adults. At the Village Library, we tend to see more of the younger and more of the seniors there, which makes perfect sense because that's sort of where the neighborhood is. So we definitely calibrate the programs of each library location to the community around it. So while we have a very active youth presence, we of course have a very active senior presence. And so we love making book recommendations. We love helping with technology questions. Again, it's a small branch, but it packs a big punch with the community. And again, we are very loved and respected by our patrons that come there.
So sandwiched between the Village, the oldest, and the Wando Library, which is a fabulous new building, we've got that middle stepchild kind of library that's got a lot of attention because the renovations there were just recently completed.
Yes. Now, the Mount Pleasant Library has been there for a long time, and that is also another beloved staple of the community. Mount Pleasant and East Cooper is a bunch of super readers, and the Mount Pleasant Library actually has the most active holds in Charleston County, which means that when people put books on hold, they are requesting books to be kept for them. And we have a lot of super readers, and they put an amazing amount of books on hold at Mount Pleasant. So we have a lot of readers that come. The renovation of that branch was very timely because, again, we've seen an increase in our youth presence, and we had a lot of teens coming to the library. So we were able to enclose a teen space where we have an enclosed children's area, we have an enclosed teen area. So that that way, the adults can have the more main part of the building, but then we have these enclosed areas for children's and teens, supervised by staff, for those youths to go both, after school, but then, during school holidays and things like that. And we have a very active school group in Mount Pleasant. And I know that we are their library as a public library. We are their resource for educational success. So the Mount Pleasant Library has a great amount of programs too. They have some very popular programs. The living room conversations are some of the favorites. That's where people come talk about, facilitate discussions of topics of mind. And there's also the Great Stories Club, where it is about historical stories, where you're reading a book or you have a speaker come in, and they're, again, facilitated by library staff.
They're more than just a place that you go to check out books. We're talking libraries today here on the Mount Pleasant podcast with Angela Craig. She's the executive director with the Charleston County Public Library. We've got 3 library branches here in the Mount Pleasant area. And Angela, I got to tell you my favorite, not just because it's almost across the street from where I live, but the Wando Library. What a beautiful, amazing building. I'm blown away every time I visit.
It is, and that is definitely one of our cornerstones for our library system. Wando was the very first brand new library per the referendum that we opened. It opened in 2019. It's been open for 5 years, if you can believe it. But it is 40,000 square feet, and it is something that I think was very much needed in this corridor. It is situated right by the Wando High School and also the Carolina Park Elementary, but there are, of course, neighborhoods and businesses and everything else around there. So we are very much a active library location. We have meeting rooms of different sizes, and our auditorium can seat 500 people, but we can actually bisect it and bring down an accordion wall, which is great. So we can have programs on either side. And we've had to do that from time to time because we've had so many active groups wanting to use our meeting space, which is free and open to the public if you have a library card, that we are able to bisect the room and we can have 2 programs running at once without interrupting each other, which is great.
You're listening to the Mount Pleasant podcast.
I think one of the ways the library system has kept into, the 21st century now, one of the things at the Wando Library I'm really impressed with is the audio-visual things that you offer to folks with a library card. Why don't you share a little bit about what's going on at the library that way?
Yes, we have wonderful emerging technology at the Wando Library. We have permanent space for it at the Wando Library. We have it in portable kit form so that it can be checked out and taken to any library and facilitated as a program. But at Wando, we actually have a permanent creative studio, which is a maker space. And that has things like the sewing machine, the 3D printer, things like that. But then it also has the digital studio. Now, the creative space is for ages 18 and over. You got to have a library card. The digital studio is for spaces 16 and over, or if you are 13 and 15, you can go in with a parent guardian. And that is a multimedia studio where you can record a podcast. You can record a video clip. You can do all kinds of things that would translate very well to digital media. We have very, very seasoned, very knowledgeable library staff that run the programs. And so they are there to help oversee and connect you with resources and also to offer their expertise with any project that you might have.
Now, Angela, you've mentioned a couple of times a library card, the importance of that. So for someone who's not aware, how do I go about getting a library card?
Well, if you are a Charleston County resident, you automatically qualify for a library card. There are several ways that you can get one. First, you do have to live in Charleston County. If you are out of county, I'll walk you through that. But if you are a Charleston County resident, all you have to do is you can apply online or go to any one of our 18 library locations with a photo ID and a current piece of mail or something that identifies you as a Charleston County resident. It can be anything. It can be a bill, a letter, anything like that. And then we will get you set up. If you are an out of county resident, you are able to get an out-of-county card for $45 per year. You have to pay that annually every year.
Just so everybody knows, I'm not lying. I am a proud, got to get in the lighting correct so everybody can see it, but there it is. It's a little older card, but that's all right. I'm proud to still have it.
That's one of our older cards. Yes. So you've been around a while. That's awesome.
Well, and you mean that, of course, in the nicest possible way that I've been around.
Professional way. Yes. You've been a longtime fan of the library. I appreciate that.
Now, you've mentioned, and I think people may be surprised to hear that, but a number of times you've gone back to the fact that youth and teens, you would think the library is not a cool, hip place to be anymore, but we see a lot of teenagers and high school students that do use the library.
Yeah, and that's something that we're so happy and proud of. We have a thriving partnership with CCSD, our public school. So across the county at our 18 library locations, we are often bus stops for those kids. And the Wando Library and the Mount Pleasant Library are no exception to that. Probably if you are a Wando Library patron, you are well aware of the school bus stops that come before and after school and how the kids come after school. We like to think that we are the out-of-school partner for CCSD, but not just public schools. As I said, we have a thriving homeschool population, and there's a very large one in the East Cooper area. And again, we are their library. And so many of our programs that we have, of course, you can attend as a homeschool parent, as a homeschool student. We actually had with the Wando Mount Pleasant Library last year a science fair where it was for homeschool students, and they came and they showcased their science projects, and I was a judge for that. It was really, really fun. So it's wonderful that we have this youth presence. We also have a thriving volunteer program that is for teen volunteers ages 13 to 17. We are actively recruiting for them right now. There's an application process. Applications are open until, I believe, January 10th. So that as a volunteer, you apply for a position. They're limited positions because we have specific things that we want the teens to help us with. And it is part of our workforce development program for our teens to give them something to put on their resume whenever they're applying for a job or later for academic scholarship purposes or to get college admissions.
Let me take the volunteer thing a step further. So with the Mount Pleasant libraries that are part of the Charleston County library system for an adult, are you open to have people volunteer to help?
Well, we actually run our volunteers through the Friends of the Library. They are the ones for the adult volunteers, and they are 501c3 that manages their book sales. And so, yes, we have a very active 501c3 chapter. Their office is in downtown at Main, but we actually have a drop-off point at the Wando Library for books. So if we have adults that are interested in volunteering with the public library, the Friends of the Library is a wonderful resource for that. If you love book sales, if you love helping out with that, and I do believe they have a members night, and I think the volunteers get to go in and get first dibs. Like I've definitely volunteered for that reason so that I could get first dibs on the book sales and get some of the good books. They get some good donations. So that's a wonderful way for the adults to volunteer through the Charleston Friends Association.
Yeah, those book sales that they have are kind of awesome. But so as people understand, the Friends of the Charleston Library is not part of the library, but they're just a nonprofit that associates and helps out the library system.
Yes, they are 501c3. Yes.
We're talking libraries today, and I'm Brian Cleary. Thanking you so much for joining me on the Mount Pleasant podcast. Honored to have Angela Craig with us. She's the executive director of the Charleston County Public Library. We're talking about the 3 library branches in Mount Pleasant. Angela, how long have you been with the Charleston Library System?
I just celebrated my 5th year as executive director this year. It's gone by like that.
So when you were a young kid, you were in school going to the library. Did you always think, boy, one day I'm going to be the librarian. I'm going to some way be part of a library system?
You know, I was reflecting on this with another colleague. My mom, when she was getting her graduate degree, would take me with her to the college library. And that was in the 80s, and there wasn't a lot of things to do in a college library. But the librarian there was really kind to me, and she would bring out like coloring sheets and atlases and storybooks for me to read and play with while my mom was doing this research, because there was no childcare, that could help her out that time. And I just remember feeling that libraries were these wonderful and magical places. I loved my school library growing up. I didn't attend the public library very much as a kid because I grew up in a house of books. And so we always had this wonderful home library. But later, when I saw what public libraries offer to the community, all the wonderful services, all the ways that librarians help with technology and connecting people to vetted resources. And, it goes beyond reading. It goes beyond, helping people with their jobs or with school or with a project. I really am drawn to that because I have a heart for service, as do many librarians. So I found my home in the public library, and I've been with CCPL for 5 years, but I've been in the library profession for almost 20 years now. And it's just been like coming home.
So the Charleston County Public Library system made a little change. I'm not sure how long ago it was, but not that I've ever returned anything late. But it used to be that it was a, 5 cent a day, the dollar, whatever fine. You've taken the fines away. Is that correct?
Well, we have taken away, yes, that 25-cent daily fine where we're not going to fine you if your book is late. You do have up to a certain point to renew or to return your book. We work with a company called Unique where after a certain period, I think it is 9 weeks, if you have not returned the item, then we charge you for the price of the item. Now, you can bring back the book or wherever it is, and you could have that amended. But no, we're not sending out daily reminders of, charge me 25 cents or whatever it was, because we found that people were a little embarrassed by that. I understand. I've lost books. I've turned in books late, and we weren't really getting the items back. So we found that when people have a little bit more time and there isn't the stigma of I'm getting fined 25 cents a day, they were able to bring things back. So we've had a wonderful return rate with this new program. And we know things happen. We're human too. I've lost books as the library director. I've had to pay for books as the library director that my children have lost that turned it out to be underneath the seat of the car the whole time. And so now I have this book that I own. But we understand that life happens and people are busy. So we found that this was a more productive way for the community to maintain the items a little bit longer while also returning them at a better pace.
So, Angela, we've all heard stories, read them in the newspaper, seen them online of the book that was returned 50 years after it was due. Does the Charleston County Public Library, do you have any great stories like that you can share?
I have not heard. I've heard of people who have returned books that were maybe like a decade or so older, like not that old. And we just let them keep the book. I've heard of people who have moved and come back, and when they were moving, they realized that they had library books, so they brought those. So we don't have any books where, we've had it for 50 years, but yeah, it's been more of this has been on my bookshelf and I moved away and then I realized it actually isn't my book, so here you go. And we just let them keep it because at that point, we've removed it from the collection. We figured we weren't getting it back, so it was their book.
So we're blessed to have these 3 public libraries here in the East Cooper area. They've all been remodeled, or in the case of the Wando Library, is brand new. So for people who are a little skeptical about libraries, think, oh, that's my parents. That was the other century. In the 1900s, we went to the library, but it's the 2000s. What's the message that you could put across to people in terms of libraries and their importance here in the 21st century?
Oh, libraries are for everybody. This is not the libraries of even 10 years ago. Books are always central to what we do, always. But we have a very engaging programs that we have at all of our library locations. We have very talented staff. We also have a very impressive digital platform for ebooks and digital downloads. And so your library card with CCPL actually gets you Overdrive and other access. The Libby app is one of the best things that we have, where it is an app that you download, you link your library card on there, and we have an online catalog where you can download books straight to your smartphone, to your tablet, whatever you need, and it's free. We have a growing demographic of what we call our e-users, where they have come into the library exactly once to get their library card, and they never actually set foot in our branches again, but they're very active. They are online users. They're downloading our CDs, music, streaming music. They're downloading ebooks, and they're very active users, but they just aren't coming in physically to the building, but they love the resources that we have online. So there you go.
The internet really has changed the library. In fact, I can even remember, and I hate to say the word, but during the COVID times where people would go to the parking lots of the library to be able to use the Wi-Fi there, you've really introduced and allowed a lot of kids who may otherwise not have access, or people in general, to be able to access the internet at your facilities.
Yes. Our Wi-Fi is some of our most beloved and well-used resource. You don't have to have a library card to use the Wi-Fi. You do have to have a library card to check out items, to use some of our services, such as, meeting rooms and things like that. To use a desktop computer, you have to have a library card or a guest pass, but the Wi-Fi is free. We have an online agreement. We have filters. And so we want to make sure that, people understand that, of course, you're welcome to use our Wi-Fi with your device. During COVID, like you were saying, that was something that we didn't realize that the new buildings were going to set us up for success in that way, because even though the doors were closed, we were able to leverage our parking lots. And you're right. The Wando was a great example where I would drive by and I would see 20 cars, 30 cars in the parking lot using the Wi-Fi, and we have excellent Wi-Fi, and we were able to broadcast it and cover a very wide area, not just at the Wando Library, but in our rural areas as well, where broadband wasn't as accessible at that time and still some challenges. So we're very happy that we can connect people to that resource.
Angela, let me wrap up on this. One other thing that hasn't changed about the library, still got to be quiet when you go into the library.
Yes and no. I think that there are frequencies for when you can be a little noisier. Again, we tend to scale our programs with the youth. So if you're there for story time, even if we're in a meeting room or things like that, it's probably going to be a little noisy. Wando, we can kind of manage the noise a bit better because we can move the kids around or close the door. Now in the village, if we have an indoor story time, it's a small little branch, it's going to be noisy. After school as well. And in the summertime, we're noisy all the time because everyone's coming in. But we do have quiet times, and the evenings are a wonderful time to go to the public library if you're just trying to get some work done because kids are home. It's very quiet. I've noticed across the board that that's a nice time just to kind of go, sit down with your computer if you need like third space to work and get some work done, or just read a book and enjoy. There is a quiet room at the Wando Library as well where no one is allowed to talk. So that is another great benefit of the Wando Library.
And again, there you see the diversity of what's going on at the library, how it's changed. Angela, there's so many different programs and stuff. Is the best place for people to go to get information to your website? And if so, what's that address?
Yes, that is ccpl.org. That has everything. If you have your library card, you can log in and you can manage your account from there. You can find out library locations. You can reach out, and there's a calendar as well that has all the events for the different libraries. Things are changing all the time. We love having our communities visit our libraries. Whether you're virtual or in person, we love serving the Charleston County community. We love our Mount Pleasant residents.
In the East Scoop area, we've got 3 libraries. Take advantage of visiting one, heck, all of them, the Village, the Mount Pleasant Library, and the Wando Library. Angela Craig is the Executive Director with the Charleston Public Library. Angela, thanks so much for your time, but mostly for all that great information.
Thank you so much, Brian, and you have a wonderful rest of your day.
The library is a great place to hang out. Check out one of the Mount Pleasant libraries, and maybe while you're there, pick up a copy of Mount Pleasant Magazine. This is where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive. It's the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant Podcast. Your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.